A vessel eases into the port of Melbourne. 16 decks of flat steel stacked above the waterline. The stern ramp drops, and for the next several hours a continuous line of electric vehicles rolls down it under their own power, close to 5,000 of them. Painted along the hull, in letters legible from the far side of the harbor, is the name of a car company. Not a shipping line, a car company. 4 years ago, that ship did not exist. Neither did the 7 others like it. Between January 2024 and September 2025, BYD assembled a fleet of 8 ocean-going car carriers from a standing start. Enough capacity to move more than 1 million vehicles a year to Europe, South America, Australia, and Southeast Asia without booking a single slot from anyone. Most explanations of why this happened get the reason wrong. It was not ambition, and it was not a statement. It was arithmetic. A number on a charter contract went up roughly 9-fold in 36 months, and BYD ran the maths on rent versus ownership. The engineering inside these vessels is genuinely unusual, including a mechanical system that lets the ship physically change the height of its own floors mid-service. But the part almost nobody has covered is what happened to the charter market after those 8 ships were delivered. Because the shortage that justified the whole program is now over. Start with a constraint that shaped everything downstream. You cannot efficiently ship a finished car in a standard container. It has been tried repeatedly. A sedan inside a 40-foot box has to be strapped down, wheel-chocked, and protected against shifting. You pay ocean freight on a large volume of empty air, so the finished vehicle trade uses a different vessel class entirely. Roll-on, roll-off, ro-ro. Structurally, a pure car and truck carrier, a PCTC, is closer to a multi-story car park than a conventional ship. Flat, continuous decks, stacked vertically, connected by internal ramps, wrapped in a hull. Doors at the stern, and usually the bow and side as well. Cars are driven aboard individually, in a relay that runs for hours. The propulsion system of the cargo is the loading mechanism. That choice cascades into the shape of the vessel. Because every deck must be flat and unobstructed, the hull loses the tapering geometry of a container ship. What you get is a rectangular slab 16 stories tall, with a bow grafted onto the front. The ugliness is a direct output of the engineering requirement. The industry even measures capacity in its own unit, the 1966 Toyota Corona. When a carrier is rated at 9,200 vehicles, the technical statement is that it holds 9,200 Corona-sized volumes of deck space. Loaded entirely with large SUVs, it carries considerably fewer actual cars. This corner of shipping has always been invisible, and invisibility is the business model. Roughly 80 to 90% of world trade by volume moves by sea, and the sector only enters public awareness when it fails. The finished vehicle trade is quieter still. A handful of specialist operators, Wallenius Wilhelmsen, NYK, K-Line, Hogue, Grimaldi, running a network most people have never heard of. Then the supply of ships stopped matching the supply of cars. The shortage that triggered everything did not begin in 2021. It began in 2008. The financial crisis destroyed global car sales. A PCTC cannot pivot to grain or crude or containers. Its decks are built for wheeled cargo and nothing else. When volumes collapsed, owners held expensive specialized steel with nothing to put on it. Rates fell through the floor. The lesson that generation of ship owners absorbed was blunt. Never order a car carrier on speculation. They followed it for more than a decade. New PCTC orders were close to non-existent through the 2010s. Vessels reached the end of their economic lives and went to the breakers. Very little replaced them. The fleet quietly shrank, year after year, and nobody objected because demand was flat too. Supply and demand fell together, so the imbalance stayed hidden. Then 2 curves crossed at once. Post-pandemic demand rebounded hard, and China's vehicle exports went vertical. In 2019, China exported roughly 700,000 vehicles. In global terms, a rounding error. Japan led that year with about 4.8 million. By 2023, China exported 4.91 million and passed Japan to become the world's largest vehicle exporter for the first time. 2024, around 5.5 million. 2025, 7.098 million. That is a tenfold increase in 6 years. Now hold both facts together. A specialized global fleet that had been contracting for 15 years, meeting an export curve that rose almost vertically over 4. What followed is not a mystery. It is capacity economics. Demand expands rapidly. Supply is physically frozen because a car carrier takes years to design, order, build, and commission. You cannot add a deck to an existing ship. You cannot repurpose a bulk carrier. Before the pandemic, chartering a mid-size car carrier cost somewhere around $17,000 a day. By August 2022, Nissan was reported to have renewed a charter on a single vessel at roughly $100,000 a day. By late 2023, one-year time charter rates for a 6,500 CEU carrier had passed $110,000 a day. Roughly a 9-fold increase in about 3 years for a service whose fundamental technology had barely changed since the 1970s. Translate that into operating terms. Renting one ship for 30 days now cost around $3.5 million. For a manufacturer whose competitive position rests on undercutting incumbents on price, ocean freight had stopped being a line item and become a material component of the sticker price. The larger one was control. A charter is a contract with a counterparty. If a competitor secures a vessel for 3 years, that vessel is gone, and no amount of cash changes it. Your factory can be running at full rate, and your finished vehicles still accumulate in a marshalling yard because there is no deck space. That is what BYD was analyzing in 2022. Here is where most coverage of this story goes wrong, and it is worth correcting carefully, because the correction is more interesting than the myth. You will frequently hear that BYD broke a century-old rule, that no automaker had ever owned ocean-going vessels, and BYD was the first. Toyota has long been connected to Toyo Fuji Shipping. Nissan holds a majority position in Nissan Motor Car Carrier. Hyundai established Glovis in 2001 to control finished vehicle logistics, and Glovis has since signed a cooperation agreement with BYD. Automaker-owned shipping is not new. Every large export-driven auto industry eventually reaches the same conclusion. What is genuinely new is the rate of construction. Hyundai grew Glovis over 2 decades. Japanese carriers were built up across a generation. BYD went from 0 vessels to 8 in 20 months. That compression is the actual story, and it is not a story about automotive strategy. It is a story about where the world's shipbuilding capacity now sits. In 2022, BYD committed roughly 5 billion yuan, about $687 million, to an 8-vessel rewrote program. Chairman Wang Chuanfu's stated reasoning was direct. Chinese exports were surging, and there were not enough ships to carry them. The reaction across the industry ranged from skepticism to amusement. Manufacturers do not order ocean fleets. On 9 January 2024, the first vessel took on cargo at Yantai, BYD Explorer No.1. She sailed for the Netherlands and Germany with over 5,000 vehicles aboard. Then the schedule accelerated. December 2024, BYD Changzhou. January 2025, BYD Hefei. April 2025, BYD Shenzhen. 2025, BYD Changsha. BYD Xi'an. July 2025, BYD Zhengzhou. September 2025, BYD Jinan. The Shenzhen is the headline vessel, 219.9 meters long, 37.7 meters wide, 16 decks, 9,200 CEU. At entry into service, she was the largest car carrier in the world, taking the record from Hug Autoliner's 9,100 CEU Aurora. Her first commercial voyage went to Brazil. With Jinan commissioned in September 2025, the program closed. Most of the fleet carries around 7,000 vehicles. 3 carry 9,200. Combined annual capacity exceeds 1 million. BYD has signaled no near-term plans to expand further. Now the obvious question. If Volkswagen decided today it wanted 8 new car carriers, Every major yard would say the same thing. Get in the queue, we will talk about the 2030s. BYD skipped the queue because the queue is in China. Chinese yards now account for well over half of all new shipping tonnage delivered globally and the majority of new orders by weight. 6 of the 10 largest shipbuilders on Earth are Chinese. This is the piece routinely missed in Western coverage. BYD's fleet was not a bold gamble that paid off. It was the predictable output of one country simultaneously becoming the dominant vehicle exporter and the dominant shipbuilder. The orders went to Guangzhou Shipyard International, SimC Raffles, and China Merchants, all a domestic logistics problem away. The scale of that dominance shows up in an unexpected place. Wallenius Wilhelmsen, the Norwegian operator, is building its next-generation Shaper class, up to 14 vessels, some being upsized to 11,300 CEU. They are being built at a Chinese yard. Stand on the quay and look up, and the impression is architectural rather than nautical. No sheer, no flare, almost no superstructure detailing. A floating rectangular building. Loading is where the engineering shows. The stern ramp is a hydraulically actuated structure, rated to take heavy vehicles under power. Quarter and side ramps exist purely to increase parallel throughput. More simultaneous entry points, faster turnaround. And turnaround time is the largest controllable cost at port. Loading a 9,000 vehicle ship is therefore a labor choreography problem, not a crane problem. Hundreds of drivers work a continuous cycle. Drive up the ramp, position to marked spacing, disembark, return to the quay by bicycle or shuttle, repeat. Clearances between parked vehicles are measured in centimeters, because every centimeter of unused deck is lost revenue. And now, the feature that almost nobody outside the sector knows about. The decks move. Modern PCTCs are built with hoistable decks, deck panels that can be raised or lowered hydraulically to change the clear height between levels. And the vessel packs in maximum numbers of hatchbacks and sedans. Raise them, and the same hull accepts buses, tractors, mining equipment, agricultural machinery. The ship reconfigures its own floor plan according to cargo mix. That single capability is the reason the rewrote model survives commercially at all. It converts a rigid single-purpose asset into a partially flexible one. Electric vehicles complicate the picture considerably. They are heavier than equivalent combustion cars, which changes deck loading and stability calculations. More significantly, a parked EV carries stored chemical energy that a petrol car with a near-empty tank does not. A lithium thermal runaway on an enclosed vehicle deck is one of the hardest fire scenarios in commercial shipping. High temperature, self-sustaining, and resistant to conventional suppression. The industry responded with state-of-charge limits on loading, redesigned detection and suppression systems, and a repricing of insurance for EV-heavy voyages. These are 25-year assets that must stay legal in IMO-regulated waters for their entire service life, under emissions rules scheduled to tighten repeatedly across that period. Every voyage has 2 legs. Only one of them generates revenue. BYD loads in China and sails to Europe, Brazil, Mexico, Australia. Decks full, vehicles packed to centimeter tolerances. That leg is highly efficient. Then the ship has to come back. Europe does not send 9,000 cars to China. Neither does Brazil. Neither does Australia. Reporting has repeatedly confirmed that BYD runs exports on its own vessels, even when that means returning with partially or entirely empty decks. The cost consequence is severe. An empty PCTC burns close to the same fuel as a loaded one. Hull form dominates resistance, and a lightly loaded rowrow sits high with a large exposed side profile that increases windage. It pays identical crew wages, port dues, canal fees, and insurance. Every mile of that return leg is subtracted from what the outbound leg earned. This is not a footnote. It is precisely why specialist carriers exist. Wallenius Wilhelmsen, NYK, K-Line, and Höegh survive by never depending on a single customer or a single directional flow. Their vessels carry Japanese vehicles to Europe, European construction plant to the Middle East, used vehicles into Africa. Decades of commercial relationships exist purely to prevent decks sailing empty. BYD traded that efficiency for speed and control. While export volumes were doubling and tariff deadlines were the binding constraint, that was defensible. It is also the structural weakness in the design, which is why one phrase from the Explorer No.1 launch matters. BYD stated the vessel would be available to partners while serving BYD's own needs. The fleet is not only infrastructure, it is a potential product. BYD can sell deck space to other Chinese manufacturers, the same ones it is fighting in Europe, Brazil, and Southeast Asia. Your competitor becomes your landlord. And BYD is not alone in reaching this conclusion. Geely's logistics arm launched its own 7,000-vehicle rewrote, Jisu Fortune, in May 2025, with over 5,000 vehicles. SAIC has expanded into shipping. Chery, China's largest vehicle exporter by volume, has moved the same direction. This is not one company acting unusually. Here is the part that changes how you should read everything above. The shortage is over. Recall the mechanism from Chapter 2. High rates trigger a construction wave. The rate response was immediate and severe. From a 2023 peak above $110,000 a day, average daily charter rates for large PCTCs had fallen to roughly $47,500 by August 2025. Analysts had forecast a halving to $50,000. The market went through it. Then, the order book reacted. The same doctrinal whiplash that emptied the order book after 2008 is repeating. Consider what that means for BYD. The program was justified by a scarcity that no longer exists. Chartering is dramatically cheaper today than when the decision was made. A competitor that stayed flexible can now buy transport on the open market at less than half the peak. With no capital tied up, no crews to employ, no 25-year depreciation schedule, and no obligation to sail empty on the return leg. Ownership looks brilliant during a squeeze. It looks like a large block of fixed cost you cannot easily shed. The counterweight is that BYD's savings were real while they lasted. The company has estimated per-vehicle shipping cost reductions of 30 to 40%, and control has value that does not appear on a charter rate index. In late 2025, with Mexican tariffs on Chinese imports approaching, BYD moved vehicles across the Pacific and landed them ahead of the deadline. No slot negotiation, no queue, no third party setting the schedule. The duty saved on that single decision was substantial. You cannot buy that with a spot charter. You can only own it. Step back from the ships. For most of the 20th century, the dominant manufacturing doctrine was specialization. Do what you do best. Buy everything else from whoever does it better.